Welcome, everybody, to episode number 6 of Mass Historia. I am your host, Udo, and joining me tonight are my co-hosts, Tim and Dr. Tom.
I've been promoted. We've been promoted, Tim.
Yep, pretty much. I mean, at this point, like, if I called you guests for the 5th time in a row, that would be a little weird. Steve Rambo and Vinuath, welcome to the show. Tonight, we are gonna go explore one of the coolest motherfuckers on the planet.
Just a BAMF!
Right?
Nope.
I don't know. Is he gonna knock JPJ out of the water?
You know,
Can such things be done?
I think we're going to have to run a vote on it.
That sounds like
excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
That
Well,
sounds like the kind of talk that makes you catch some yellow fever.
I know.
Just
I
saying.
know. It's all right. Ben Franklin will defend me.
With freedom and eagles.
Indeed.
October says, Mass Historia or actual Jake, decisions. Well,
There is only one correct decision.
to be 100% honest with you, you can always watch this show later. You just won't get to interact live. So,
Or you could watch it now and then watch it again later
That's
because it's
very
worth a
true.
rewatch.
That's very
Yeah. It's also
Willis
physically
Wonder,
possible.
welcome to the show.
Yeah.
So,
You know, just saying.
I know that I
I don't
talked to.
think Witless is so Witless because he's here with us.
Yeah, he's pretty just wonder, right? I know that I talked to Tim about it already. But Tom, did you do any research for tonight's episode at all?
Nope.
Okay. So I'm going to definitely be surprising a lot of people with a lot of stuff that they didn't know. Because
I always kind of like coming in blind and just, like, it's fun to get blindsided with cool history.
Right. So, before we talk about what we're doing tonight, I want to remind everybody that we do in fact have merchandise for the show. We have the "If Not for the Brave Actions of the Heroic Men of the 7th Heavy Battery of the Royal Australian Artillery, we would be speaking emu today" t-shirt. We've sold...
I cannot wait till mine gets here.
Yep, we've sold a few of them. I'm pretty excited about them. Witless says that he ordered the ass, grass, and gas shirt. Excellent. All right.
Vinuath, Journeyman Bader is me.
Right.
Just saying.
All right. So, tonight, we are going to be talking about none other than Ben motherfucking Franklin. We have another first coming tonight. We won't get through the entirety of Ben Franklin tonight.
He's too goddamn cool
It's
for one
just too
episode to contain him.
Too much. So,
That picture of him just makes me think of like a Dubs thing for Dubs from 4chan.
yeah.
All right, lost
Yeah.
me there.
No, it's an obscure reference. If you don't get it, then we do not.
You're not missing out on any.
You're
Yep.
not missing out on much, and there's
All
just
it
too
means is
much
that
to
you're a
explain.
good person,
Yeah,
and you
exactly.
don't read the most wretched cesspool anus of the internet.
But
Ain't nobody got time for that.
as always, we have a little bit of a content warning. This is an educational stream. We are covering historic events and things like mythology. If you have a problem with things that happened in history and dislike talking about violence, nudity, and other not very PC topics, get gone. This ain't the show for you, Chief. I like keeping that here. I think that'll be a part of this forever.
Yeah.
So. All right. So, the name of tonight's episode is Hunger is the Best Pickle. This is the life and shenanigans of Benjamin Franklin. I'd like to acknowledge our primary source, which is the Project Gutenberg's autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. If you're interested and are watching the live show, type !Ben in the chat, and it'll get you to a copy of Ben Franklin's autobiography, which is free.
We have a comment from Wild Bard that Udo, you're a little quiet.
Let me see if I can adjust that here real quick.
Suddenly becomes super fucking loud.
No, Udo was a little quiet, not Dr. Tom.
Right.
I was. Shut up, Tim.
All right. Benoit says we got to put a comma in before Chief. But anyway, I have tried an alternative form of raising my volume by lowering your volume.
And then boosting the whole stream.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
So let me know how that's sounding, everybody, when you get a chance. But for example, if anybody ever wants to get any information on this throughout the show, ! Ben will bring you to what you need to see. But you guys ready to get into some history?
Boy, am I.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Hell yeah.
I said that wrong. Am I?
Excellent. All right. So our story begins briefly with Josiah Franklin in 1682.
As Dad?
Yes. Yep.
Called it.
As an English businessman, Josiah was the 9th child of blacksmith Thomas Franklin and Jane White. Josiah worked as a fabric dyer in Ecton, Northamptonshire. Now, the 1680s were not the best time in England. Many regarded the country as being beset by powerful and unscrupulous enemies at home and abroad. Across the Channel, Louis the, I believe, 14th was XIV 14, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Louis the 14th contemplated his next assault on the European.
Louis.
Yeah, exactly. Is it Louis?
Louis.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Louis.
It's French, huh? Yeah.
Sure is. It's almost like the French king.
Right. So Louis the 14th was contemplating his next assault on European Protestantism. In England, they suspected the misty conspiracies being sold to the country, having the country's freedom being sold to France and its religion being given to Rome. Corrupt ministers thumbed their noses at laws and the Constitution, while toadying bishops abandoned the church and its popish enemies. Most ominous of all, a large army that had been raised earlier in the year still existed, and the money voted for its disbandment was instead spent on keeping it in being, ready to give the coup de grace to England's liberties. All that said, it was a good time for him to get the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
Zoink, Scoob! We better skedaddle!
So that's exactly what Josiah Franklin did. He headed across the Atlantic Ocean and resettled in what we know as now in modern day as Massachusetts, but it was known as the Massachusetts Bay Colony, or Boston.
Right.
So then he took up the trade of a tallow chandler. I believe that's the right word. It's either chandler or chandler, one of the two.
Chandler.
Right, okay. And
candle maker.
Right. And soap boiler. Because the trade he was born into was not in high demand in New England. Josiah moved to Boston with his first wife, Anne. Her name was Anne Child. Josiah and Anne had 7 children together. Elizabeth, Samuel, Hannah, Josiah Jr., Anne, Joseph, and Joseph II. It just says Joseph II, but I think that means Joseph II.
Joseph II. Yeah.
Right. As Joseph I.
Joseph II.
Right. Joseph I died soon after birth, and the next one was named after him. Sadly, she died from the effects of giving birth to Joseph II as her 7th child in July of 1989.
Man, she had a good run.
Yeah, there's a lot of
I mean,
kids.
back in those days.
Yep.
Yeah, given labor mortality rates back then, like giving birth to 6 kids.
Yep.
Damn.
Frankly, once you got 3 or 4 popped out and surviving past 6 months, throw in the towel. You won.
Right. Well, unfortunately, Aunt Child seemed like a bit of a noob when it comes to childbirthing, because in November of that very same year, Josiah Franklin remarried and to his second wife, Abiah Folger, who then who was the daughter of Peter Folger, one of the first settlers in New England. Abiah bore Joseph 10 children. John,
Woof.
Peter, Mary, James, Sarah, Ebenezer, Thomas, Benjamin, Lydia, and Jane.
Slow down, Josiah. Jesus.
Right,
I
exactly.
see where Ben Franklin came by it, honestly.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, exactly.
Following in old Papa's footsteps.
Right? Fun fact, Abiah's sister, Bethesua Folger, was a active and theatric participant in the events of the Salem witch trials. So,
All right.
here's one of the first strange coincidences that just happened to surround Ben Franklin. Like, this essentially would mean his aunt, right? His aunt was one of the people who caused the Salem witch trials.
So you know how there's like the Abe Lincoln Vampire Slayer movie?
Right.
And all of its trashy goodness? Ben Franklin, witch hunter!
Exactly.
Secret history.
Yeah, Ben Franklin's the next Van Helsing.
Right. October says, oof, too many kids. Yeah.
Oh, Ben Helsing, Ben Helsing would work so good.
Right. Vinoath says, anything to do with Folger's coffee. It is spelled different. Just it's Folger. I guess it might be Folger or Folger. Tuesday with Ben Monster. Welcome to the stream. Is it true that Ben Franklin was a rebel indeed? He liked to lie naked while he smoked on the weed. We will learn about that.
Yep. Quit jumping ahead, Tuesday.
So, Benjamin Franklin was born on January 17th of 1706 in Boston. He was born on a small house. It says "on" in these notes here, but that's a problem here. He was born.
I think he was born on
in a small house
on the roof
on 17 Milk Street, across the street from the old meeting house. It actually took me way longer than I expected to find the word milk on this old map. Like I had to cross-reference it with modern day Google Maps to find it.
Wow.
That's cool.
The only
I'm
reason
guessing that map is quite a bit larger than the one we're currently looking at.
Yes.
Just a bit.
But this was one of the only old-timey maps I could find with Milk
Also,
Street.
Real quick,
Mhm.
the engineer in me is looking at the layout of those streets going, no!
Oh
no.
yeah. Boston was a nightmare. Although
Pretty much any of the large cities on the East Coast before the survey really came into effect were nightmarish.
So, Philadelphia was fantastic.
Oh.
It was.
Oh, they actually know what they were doing on that?
Yeah,
one?
everything was done in squares. It was super easy. Like, Elbolio, welcome to the stream. You should see property maps from them. They overlap. Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Well, that was a
Phantom
big
Hydra,
problem
welcome.
back then is they had their way of determining property was by quote-unquote meets and bounds was what they called it, and it would be walk that way till you hit the tree, then walk over there until you run into the rock that looks like a dog.
Right,
Problem is that trees die, rocks can be moved.
right. And I bet they were in order to gain more property. October says, this is my nightmare. It's city driving times 1,000. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
All right, so
Yeah.
born the 15th of 17 children and the youngest son, Benjamin Franklin was intended by his father to serve the church. It was a common practice.
Oh.
Very common. I was about to say, I didn't want to interrupt your sentence,
No,
but
go
I was
ahead.
like, oh, going into the clergy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the plan. Too many kids, throw them into the church.
Unfortunately for Josiah, little Ben showed no inclination for the church. Unfortunately, because of that, Josiah had to cut Ben's education a little bit short because he couldn't afford to pay for it. One, if he did force Ben to continue, a clergyman's salary was very low, and he couldn't expect much of a, benefit to his family out of it. And two, he was right. He was forcing his son to do something that he was not going to be good at. So,
yeah.
And with so many mouths to feed, the soap maker and the housewife couldn't afford the money for education, so they rationed what they had between the children. And when it came time for young Franklin to head off to learn, they had enough for him to attend for 2 years. So, Ben Franklin.
So many years.
Ben Franklin, one of the people we know as one of the fathers of America, was educated for 2 years at the age of 8. That was his entire schooling. So, at 8 years old, young Ben Franklin started attending the South Grammar School, which was known as Boston Latin, showing early talent moving from the middle of the class to the top within a year. The following year, he attended George Brownell's English School, a school for writing and arithmetic. He showed great talent and a little bit of talent, or so a lot of talent for writing, a little bit for arithmetic. he wasn't too good at math. But still, young Franklin loved reading. He would borrow books from friends and save every penny that he could get in order to buy books. He voraciously read anything he could to attempt to improve his writing style, grammar, and eloquence. I fuck up the word eloquence, of course.
Yep, of course.
All right. Well,
apparently our host only had 2 years of schooling at age 8.
Exactly.
Well, I will say, as far as words to fuck up, like eloquence to elegance, like eloquence is just kind of the elegance of your speech.
Right.
So I feel like it works.
Fun fact, Boston Latin, the school that Benjamin Franklin attended, is the oldest school in America, founded in April 23, 1635. Yep. So you're going to see a lot of the first and stuff like that in his life.
Right.
He was on the cutting edge of fucking everything.
Because he was a man.
So, at 10, his father took him to as an apprentice in his soap and candle making shop. Ben was in charge of cutting wicks for candles, filling molds, and attending the shop and running errands. His father changed his hopes to his young son being the inheritor of the business when he would retire. Unfortunately for Josiah, young Ben did not want to follow in his father's footsteps and wanted to be a sailor.
Really?
Yes.
Huh.
At the age of 10, Ben Franklin wanted to be a sailor.
Too much reading.
Exactly. It's
Letting that kid read too many fantasies.
He just
get him reading more books about soap.
Right. He just knew across the ocean right now there's some guy getting ready to leave White Castle, England. And he's just
and I gotta know that man.
Exactly. He was employed in his father's business for another 2 years. And in 1717, his brother James returned from England with a brand new thing, a printing press, and a set of letters, and a small amount of capital to set up his printing business in Boston.
Yeah.
The New England Courant was the second newspaper in America. And to prevent Ben from becoming a sailor, as his older brother Josiah already had done, his father sent him to work with his brother James as an apprentice. He made him sign an indentureship for his apprenticeship, which bound him to work for his brother until he turned 21. And only then he could earn wages.
Lol?
Yeah. This is the period. Well, go ahead.
Back then, that's a really long indentureship.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, how old was he when he started it? Just to double check.
Like
12.
12, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
A 9-year indentureship.
What the hell?
It's more the fact with an indentureship, you an indentureship means that you basically get room and board,
Right?
Yeah,
and whatever else the owner of the company wants to throw your way
that's
in exchange for working for him.
that's about like grad school.
So the
Yeah.
fact that he indentured his son till 21,
Right.
which back then you're approaching middle age at that point
Yeah.
almost.
Mm-hmm.
That's woof.
Middle age for
Yeah.
most people, but not old Ben.
Yeah.
Not all Ben.
Right.
I was gonna say like grad school was 7 years, and that was forever and a half.
Right.
Well, and I shouldn't say 21's middle age, but it's definitely adulthood.
Yeah.
Way into adulthood.
Mm-hmm. Well, so this is the time period where we will find the first of young Ben Franklin's shenanigans.
Yeah.
Pretty excited to share.
12-year-old shenanigans.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, dude.
Super
Perfect.
I was
I'm
getting
happy.
into shenanigans when I was 12.
Right. But first,
I
let's
was the
talk about
sweetest
Ben
little boy.
Franklin's very first invention. So Franklin loved swimming. When he was 11 years old, he invented swimming fins.
Huh.
It was the first
Cool.
It was his first documented invention, and he made a pair of oval wooden planks with holes in the center. By grasping the planks with his hands, it gave him extra thrust when swimming. He also tried to strap boards to his ankles, but found them clunky. In his autobiography... What's that? Go ahead.
Because it's almost like you got boards strapped to your
Right. In his autobiography, he said, "When I was a boy, I made 2 oval pallets, each about 10 inches long and 6 inches broad, with a hole for the thumb in order to retain it fast in the palm of my hand. They much resembled a painter's palette. In swimming, I pushed the edges of these forward, and I struck the water with their flat surfaces as I drew them back. I remember I swam faster by means of these pallets, but they fatigued my wrist. I also fitted the soles of my feet with a kind of sandals, but I was not satisfied with them, because I observed that the stroke was partially given by the inside of the feet and the ankles, and not entirely with the soles of the feet. For this contribution to the sport, Franklin was posthumously inducted into the International Swimming Hall of Fame."
Lol.
Yeah.
Also, your Ben Franklin makes me think of Morgan Freeman.
That's fine. I just imagine just get a little bit fatter.
Morgan
Right?
Freeman. And then he took a long oval and then strapped it to his hands.
Your Ben Franklin did not remind me of Morgan Freeman.
Okay, well, then Morgan Freeman, Benjamin Franklin.
Benjamin
Morgan
Franklin.
Freeman, Benjamin Franklin.
So, we're gonna set some facts straight here. Because
This
this.
not.
Go ahead.
I
That's
wasn't
the
going
wrong-
to say anything. Just let it go. Just let it go.
That's the wrong version of straight. Damn it.
Right. Wait a minute. What do you mean?
That's
That's for
That's
like
how
a
you
channel
spell
of
a
water
straight through
between
left,
like
yeah.
two blocks of land.
Is there
You
another
need a
way
G-
to spell
you need
straight?
a GH in there.
Yeah,
Fuck.
there's a GH in there.
Well, whatever.
Learning with Skeptalk.
This is a history channel, not a spelling channel. I'm just joking.
History
No,
of
this is-
correct spelling.
I can tell you guys that I wrote this one at 3 o'clock in the morning last night for sure. Like, yeah. Well, I mean that's how it goes. Thank you guys very much for that applause. I acknowledge my fuck up. So, a lot of pro-vegetarian sources will tote the fact that Benjamin Franklin was a vegetarian and quote a lot of what he said at this time frame of what we're talking about right now. We need to set a little bit of that straight. Again, I fucked it up again there. He did go vegetarian for a time, but it was not for a reason that he was misquoted for.
Is it because you couldn't afford meat?
Well, kind of.
Also, I was gonna say we can make this work, this spelling work, because it's a river of facts through in between a bunch of land misinformation. So we're in the strait of truth.
This has been Bending Over Backwards with Dr. Tom.
Hey, you know, if I couldn't bullshit, I wouldn't have made through grad school.
Right. So another quote from Ben here. A lot of these quotes in this episode will be very long because he was a long-winded man.
He was a very eloquent fellow.
Right? When about 16 years of age, I happened to meet with a book written by one Tyrone, recommending a vegetable diet. I determined to go into it. My brother, being unmarried, did not keep house, but boarded himself and his apprentices in another family. My refusing to eat flesh occasionally became an inconveniency, and I was frequently chid for my singularity. I made myself acquainted with Tyrone's manner of preparing some of his dishes, such as boiling potatoes or rice, making hasty puddings, and a few others. And then I proposed to my brother that if he would give me weekly half of the money that he paid for board, I would board myself. He instantly agreed to it, and I presently found that I could save half of what he then paid me. This was an additional fund for buying books. I had another advantage in it. My brother and the rest going from the printing house to their meals, I would remain there alone, dispatching presently my light repast, which often was no more than a biscuit or a slice of bread, and a handful of raisins or a tart from the pastry cook's, and a glass of water. Had the rest of the time until they returned for their study, in which I made the greater progress than that greater clearness of head and quicker apprehension which usually attended temperance in eating and drinking. So basically, he was trying to say that a vegetarian diet meant that he could save money and time. Right.
Yeah.
Right? He had been desperate from a young age to acquire books and read them. Now, he had means of doing both. Franklin did not make any exaggerated claims for the health benefits of abstaining from meat, nor does he criticize meat as being unhealthy. The quotes that are misused come from a dissertation by Franklin of the book that he came upon by Thomas Tyrone. This was probably the book Wisdom Dictates, written in 1691, which was a digest of Tyrone's much lengthier book, The Way to Health, Wealth, and Happiness. So, if you see quotes from Ben Franklin about how meat is bad,
bullshit.
That is a quick look at a dissertation of an example of someone else.
Let me put it this way. How often do you see fat vegetarians?
Yeah.
Ben Franklin was a rotund fella.
Right.
And yes, Phantom Hydra, he was a smug, rotund fella.
Exactly. So,
I'd have been smug too.
James Franklin, the older brother, right, wasn't at all supportive of Ben's writing ambitions and rejected every single piece that Ben submitted to the paper.
Rude.
Yep.
Well, yeah, if he supported his writing endeavors, he loses his close to slave till he becomes 21.
Right. But Ben was desperate to get published and to prove his brother wrong. So the younger Franklin...
He worked at a printing house. Just wait for them to go eat their meat and publish their own shit.
He would be stealing at that point. That paper doesn't belong to him.
Sacrifices must be made.
They're stealing his labor.
Right. So the younger Franklin devised a plan. In 1722, the Boston paper, the Courant, first published a letter from a widow with a keen wit and a gift for satire. Every few weeks...
Real quick.
Go ahead.
That's spelled Courant.
Yes.
I think that's current.
Well, whatever. Courant.
Or Courant. Something like that.
Yeah.
Courant.
It could be the current. That's that's very possible too.
Also, I know of the Silence Do Good letters.
Yeah.
Yeah, from
So do I.
National Motherfucking Treasure.
Right?
Yeah.
So every few weeks, another letter from Silence Dogood would appear. The city was captivated by the lady's willingness to poke fun at the more illustrious institutions. The letters poked fun at various aspects of colonial America, such as the drunkenness of the locals, religious hypocrisy, and the persecution of women. Silence Dogood even had views about fashion for hoop petticoats. She was particularly fond of ridiculing the school Harvard. She complained that it had been ruined by corruption and elitism, and that most of its students learned nothing except how to be conceited.
She may not have been wrong.
Right?
That's a lot of higher education, not gonna lie.
The readers of the Current thought that she was a charming woman. So charming, in fact, that a few of the male readers wrote in upon learning that she was, in fact, single and offered
gets up.
to marry her.
How you doing?
Right? Unfortunately,
Hey, girl.
for the would-be suitors, Silence Dogood did not exist. Franklin had written the 14 letters between April 2nd and October 8th, 1722. And when
I've been bamboozled.
right, straight bamboozled. They got him. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. Drew Mares, thank you very much for that. When he stopped writing the letters, his brother placed an ad in the paper in an attempt to find the mysterious Silence Dogood. So when Ben confessed to his brother that he was in fact the author, his brother was
Lost his shit.
furious. Yeah, this did not go well.
I told you no.
Right?
That's it. You only get a quarter of your fucking stipend.
Right? So, bound by law to his apprenticeship, young Ben Franklin was now facing years of oppression under the angry thumb of an uncaring brother. And once again, unfortunately for Josiah, Ben Franklin was going to do something else than what was expected of him.
He was gonna go sailing.
Wait, did he really just fuck off and go sailing?
In the middle of the night, with very little to his name, Ben Franklin left Boston. He boarded a ship and sailed for New York City.
Oh my god.
And eventually, not finding nothing in New York City for any sort of prospects, he landed in Philadelphia at the Market Street Wharf.
Woo, Philadelphia.
Right?
It's a cool city.
If you look at this
really like
picture
Philly.
of Philadelphia, right, this is an ancient, a couple hundred years old depiction of Philadelphia at the time.
A couple hundred years is not ancient.
It's ancient
In
enough.
terms of American history, it sure is.
Yes, ancient American history.
It's all perspective, bro.
Right. You can see that everything is in a square, facing the same direction. That I saw a street map of this, especially along Market Street. Just complete grid. Interesting.
Hell yeah.
So,
Grid maps are good.
yep. 17 years old, and with only a few coins to his name, the scruffy young traveler made sure to tip his boatman, so that no one would know that he was just some poor schlub. The boatman at first refused the copper shilling due to the fact that Ben Franklin had worked on the boat rowing.
Really?
Yeah. This
Cool.
this was a small a small boat going from New York to Philadelphia. They were just basically traveling along the shore.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But so Ben had worked rowing, and to quote Ben Franklin, a man being sometimes more generous when he has little money than when he has plenty, perhaps through fear of being thought not to have but little. he insisted that the man
Yeah.
took his coin.
Take my money.
Right? So, the story goes like this. Ben walked up the street. So go ahead.
Oh, just that picture is amazing.
It is.
That's
Yeah,
all.
look at the lobes on that guy.
Right? Ben walked up the street, looking around at his new surroundings, until he met a young boy selling, that had bread. Not selling bread, but that had bread. By this time, Ben was used to making many a meal on bread, and he asked the boy where he got it. The boy then directed him to a baker, and when Ben arrived, he asked the baker for biscuit, just like he would get back in Boston. Turns out they don't do biscuit in Philly. So, he asked for a 3-penny loaf, to which he replied that he had no idea what you're talking about. So, not considering or knowing the difference...
Give me bread.
Right, knowing the difference of the money there.
Give bread, please.
Right?
Give bread.
Or knowing the name of the bread available in Philly, he just asked him for 3 penny worth of any sort. He was then given in return for his 3 penny 3 great puffy rolls. Surprised at the quantity and having no room in his pockets, he walked off with a roll under each arm and eating the other. Eventually, while he was wandering around, covered in bread, sweat, and looking very out of place, Ben traveled up Market Street to just past 4th Street, where he would pass the home of one Deborah Reed. And to quote old Ben, once again, she stood standing at the door, saw me, and thought that I made, as I certainly did, a most awkward and ridiculous appearance. You might ask, how did he know what she was thinking? And we'll get to that part soon. But the big thing is that she eventually told him sometime before becoming his wife. And as for now, Ben is still a hobo on the streets of Philly with big dreams and a pile of bread.
Right. Have bread, we'll travel.
Right? So, everybody's got to remember 17. 17, new city. He's got like a coin left to his name because he spent everything else on bread. And
Right.
Franklin quickly restarted his career. Although he had only apprenticed for a few years, Franklin was, as we'll soon learn more of, a very quick learner. He already knew,
badass.
right? He already
Ain't got
knew.
no time for learning.
He already knew everything he needed to know about printing and working in printing shops. He was quickly able to find work at Keimer's Printing House, which consisted of an old mangled press and one small worn-out font of English lettering. During that time, after staying in flop houses and inns and the like, he was eventually able to find a room to rent.
What is a flop house?
Basically, it's like a really, really cheap boarding house where
Okay.
it's the only point of the flop house is you come back and you fall over, you flop over, sleep,
Okay.
get up, and get kicked out.
Right.
Because my understanding of the modern connotation of flop house was basically crack den.
Oh, yeah, kind of. It's
So I was
basically a
told, like,
place
he was-
you can guarantee you won't be eaten by wolves. That's like the only thing that a flop house did for you.
Yeah, big giant room. You were given space on the floor for a very, very small amount of money, and then you were expected to leave in the morning.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
So-
it won't die of exposure or wolves.
Right.
During this time, wait, where was I at? Okay. Yeah, during this time, after staying in the flop houses, he was able to find a room to rent. And it was at the home of none other than Mr. Reed and his daughter Deborah. So,
Whoop, whoop.
so quickly, Mag, you look like I imagined. I don't know who Mag is.
What's
What's going on, Rhyme-nosers? Oh, gotcha.
Hi, oh god, that's my guild leader in a game.
Excellent.
Hi, Rhyme.
Sounds good. Welcome to the stream, Rhyme-nosers Rex.
Now all we need is a hippopotamus Rex.
Rhymenosaurus. That's different.
I always say Rhymenoceros.
Rhymenoceros. Yeah, we fucked up. Right, excellent. Anyway, I apologize for messing up your name. So, during this, okay, where the fuck was I? Okay, when I ask you to think of Ben Franklin, how many of you think of frumpy old man?
I'd go less with frumpy and more with, like, dope-ass old man.
Oh, I appreciate fact-checking this. I did a lot of work, and I'm very excited to find out how well I did. So, during this time, Ben Franklin was an absolute hunk.
Yeah, dreamboat.
His job was to carry around heavy press plates around the shop all day and pull a giant lever on the press machine. Then he would go on long jaunts around Philly distributing what they had printed. He ate a very healthy diet and was fascinated with dumbbells and would work out regularly in his off time.
Yeah, get buff.
Even though he found himself rather popular with the ladies, Philly was largely a very Christian town, full of Quakers and Protestants, so canoodling was out of the question.
Yep.
And at one point, the colonial governor of Pennsylvania, one William Keith, approached him with an idea. What if Philly had its own newspaper? They were only going to need a couple of things. Some new presses, some rollers, etc. And those things
and
can...
an editor.
Right. Those places can only be found... Yeah. Those things can only be found in one place at the time, and that was London, which presented a small issue. Due to the fact that Ben had recently been courting young Deborah. They had been secretly spending time together, getting to know each other. He had even proposed to the woman. But due to Ben's impending trip to England and his general financial situations, Deborah Reed's mother refused to endorse the marriage. Reed and Franklin then postponed their marriage. And off to England Ben went. Franklin then spent 18 months in England in an attempt to purchase equipment to start his own business. This is where we're going to learn a key factor about Ben Franklin. He was an absolute horn dog. Here's a quote directly from Ben Franklin. "The hard-to-be-governed passion of my youth had hurried me frequently into intrigues with low women that fell in my way." They just fell in his way, if you know what I'm saying. Ben,
she just fell onto me and fell onto me again,
repeatedly,
over and over and over.
So Ben came to London alone, or Ben didn't come to London alone. Franklin had come to London with his friend James Ralph. X-Man Gotti, thank you very much for that raid.
Wait, did he really get it on while he was like an invalid with hella gout?
Yep.
Oh my god.
It says he plays a bad pirate game with you.
Oh my god.
Excellent.
I told all of my friends from Atlas, which is a good game, by the way.
It's a terrible game.
You're allowed
to be wrong, Tom.
You're a terrible game.
Hey, if it's a game that is basically a clone of Ark, it means it's automatically a bad game. Because
it's
Ark's
a terrible game, but
game.
it's fun. Fuck off.
Yeah, Enid says...
Don't alienate one of our new core demographics.
Right. No, they'll be fine. They all understand. I trust that everybody on this stream is self-aware enough to realize when they're playing a bad game. And you're totally allowed to play a bad game. That's perfectly fine. But you're not allowed to, like, beat me into saying it's awesome. Right?
Yeah,
Steezy Red says that he loves how classy we look.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you. Well, okay. Don't let me get too distracted, because I will get distracted forever. No, it's all good. All right. So, Ben didn't come to London alone. He went to London with his friend James Ralph. This is Ben's description of Ralph. Ralph, though married and having one child, had determined to accompany me in this voyage. It was thought that he intended to establish a correspondence and obtain goods to sell on commission. I found out afterwards that through some discontent with his wife's relations, he purposed to leave her on their hands and never return again. So, as you guys can tell,
Oh my God.
Ralph is automatically a stand-up character, right? So, Franklin ended up loaning Ralph some money for living expenses, and Ralph eventually found work as a village schoolmaster in Berkshire. Under Franklin's name. So he was working as Ben Franklin.
Why?
Because nobody wants to hire a dude named Ralph.
Fair enough.
James
Fair
Ralph
enough.
is kind of an awful name.
Right? During that time, Ralph had taken a milliner for a mistress in London. And then he left for Berkshire and asked Franklin to take care of his mistress.
Okay, let me stop you there real quick. What is a milliner? I'm not familiar with a milliner.
I am not exactly sure. That's one thing I totally forgot to look up.
Well, what good are you?
Milliner. Very, very easy spelling.
I'm guessing it's got something to do with a mill making flour.
Wouldn't that just be a miller, though?
It might be a female term for a miller.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, I always thought a miller, like, kind of came from that.
You know, it could also
did.
be the wife of a miller.
Right.
Because it is a mistress.
Right.
Ah.
Right.
Also, we're gonna go to the part that you thought I was actually commenting on before of the fuck kind of a dude gets a mistress and then's like, hey, dude, I'm out. Again. Take care of this chick.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Franklin attempted to do so by making advances on her.
Yeah, there you go.
She rejected him, and Ralph and Ben soon had a falling out. Furious, Ralph ended the friendship and refused to pay Franklin the £27 that he owed him.
Well, how much was 27 pounds back then? Is this like,
Decent amount of money.
oh fuck, you owe me
ton.
$20, or like several $100s to a few
Several
grand?
$100s.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, Ben, you asked. I had to run away for a bit. I needed more coffee.
Right. We'll hear a little bit more about Ralph much later, but now we're going to go back to Franklin's libido.
I feel like Ralph is gonna show up like 20 years from now and be like, "Hey Ben, I need $27," and Ben Franklin's gonna be like, "Fuck you."
I think it's gonna be more along the lines of he's gonna show up in 20 years when Ben Franklin is the absolute motherfucker. Like,
Yeah.
that's dude. Everybody be like, by the way, here's the money I owe you. Can we be friends again, please?
Fuck you.
I missed the name there. It'll show up here in just a second once my
car.
Excellent. Thank you very
I
much
think-
for that follow.
Going off memory right now.
Excellent. I apologize. Apparently, my dog is going insane. Hey, bud.
Don't apologize.
protect him
Jasper's
from
a
all the
good
things.
Hey,
boy.
bud.
He's a very good boy.
Right, but he doesn't need to be barking at 10 o'clock at night.
That's fair.
Nothing.
Anyway, Massacre. Thank you very much for that follow. Welcome to the Illuminati. The most educated group of people on Twitch.
Hell yeah.
Ralph 2 Electric
Yeah.
Boogaloo. 1 pound was about 100, or 1 pound then was about 180 pounds now. So multi-hundred.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's not a several $100. That's like a few grand. Jesus.
Yep. All right. So Ben slept with a whole bunch of prostitutes. He would spend
As you should,
right.
when you're a dapper motherfucker.
He would spend every other night with what he called mercenary women.
All right.
The single greatest name for a prostitute.
I was about to say, that
I've
might be
ever
the best
heard.
name I've ever heard for a lady of the night.
Right?
Oh my fucking god.
That's so good.
You know, also, without being denigrating, I feel like very well encapsulates the idea of the profession.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because mercenary can be an insult, but also generally mercenary is yeah, you do your thing and you get paid for it, and that's what you do, and it's a valid gig.
Yeah.
Ben Franklin was a fucking wordsmith.
I dig.
He found
Sex mercenaries.
He found that a lot of his coin was going to satiating his more animalistic appetites. And at night, he would always be seen in a pub in the company of women. So much often that in letters later in life that he wrote, he described this period of his life as a miraculous time that somehow he didn't contract syphilis or some other terrible malady. The only thing that he caught was the dreaded fatherhood. At some point, one of the ladies that Ben had visited became pregnant and gave birth to his son, William.
Wait, did he describe it as catching fatherhood, or was that you?
That was me. I said catching fatherhood.
Okay. I was gonna say.
Yeah, let's face it. Ben's not the only wordsmith on this stream right now.
Right.
Sloppy meat flail.
Exactly. Nightmare Flip Flap was one of my favorites.
Oh god, sloppy meat flail will forever haunt my dreams.
Tom, Lance Connect was a German origin, not necessarily German as in Germany, but German as in that portion of Europe.
Yeah.
Longswordsman. Similar to a musketeer was a rapier using person in France. Basically, Lance Connect was along that same line of the name of a serpent.
Excellent.
Sorry, we had to do some learning.
No,
Back
it's
to the
all
stream.
back.
Yeah.
It's back.
I know that one of my primary functions on stream is that I'm dumb as shit at history.
It's all good.
And yes, Lance Connect fancied the fuck out of themselves.
Okay, it helps stay balanced.
To this day, not much is known about who she was, as Ben spoke very little about her and took that secret with him to the grave. William would eventually be taken in by Ben, but at this time, he was just another one of the countless illegitimate children that were born in the 18th century and left to foster care. Governor William Keith, the man who had sent him abroad, had promised Franklin letters of credit to purchase equipment. But those letters never materialized.
Oh no.
Uh-oh.
There he was, a young man, again, lost in a strange city, with nothing to his name, and nowhere to go back to.
Wait, double check.
He had one thing to his name.
Yeah.
A child.
Yeah. Well, not yet.
So
This is all at the same time, but yeah.
I missed something for half a sec. What city did he wind up in? Is he in London now?
London, yeah.
Okay.
So Ben did what he had always done. He just handled his shit.
He banged a lot of women.
I mean, all of those answers are true.
Right.
He quickly he got work as a typesetter in a printer's shop in what is now known as the Church of St. Bartholomew the Great in the Smithfield area of London for one Mr. Denham, who Franklin had worked with on his voyage, or met on his voyage across the ocean. While he was working there, he acquired new skills and printing shops in America had never seen.
Yeah.
Over the period of 2 years, Franklin required a decent amount of money due to being mentored by Mr. Denham. Mr. Denham was actually the one who advised him to save some of his money in order to return to America. And following this, he returned to Philadelphia in 1726 with the help of Mr. Denham. Back in Philadelphia, he continued his employment with Thomas Denham, and together they set up yet another print shop.
Yeah.
Print shops everywhere.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say a blue jeans factory.
No. It's spelled differently.
Well-
Denham. It's Denham.
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep in mind, this is shortly after printing presses became a thing. So
Yeah.
this was still very much new technology.
Oh,
Right.
actually, something I was going to ask earlier that I forgot to. Do you either of you know offhand when the printing press was invented? I legit don't know.
I believe
I'm
it was
guessing.
in the early 1600s.
Okay.
Right.
I can find out real quick.
Excellent. So in the fall...
The
go ahead.
the Gutenberg press was first created in... Shit. I thought I had it, but maybe I don't.
That was created in shit.
Yeah, get some. 1439.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but then they had to
Roughly.
learn how to produce it. Then they had to make more of them.
Yeah.
and- yeah. They
Yeah,
couldn't-
because just the
Well,
first person to
just,
actually make it, it's some crazy prototype thing that they just kind of made in their basement kind of deal.
Exactly.
And then
Yeah,
they got to
kind
figure out
of.
how to replicate it.
Well, and there's actually, I've watched a documentary on this from Stephen Fry, and it's very, very good. If anyone, you should watch it at some point. But he was fraught with all sorts of difficulties in making this press. Took him like 30 years.
Okay.
Rhyme brings up, to be fair, the Chinese had hardwood block printing 600 years earlier. So yes,
Right.
that's
the-
very true.
Actually, that actually dovetails into something else I was going to say. It was like even if in the West, printing presses had existed for a couple hundred years, the difficulties of like traveling that far would make technologies very slow to propagate. I feel like.
The other problem with the wood block printing is you have to carve your full image into a block of wood.
Right.
Whereas the whole point behind the printing press is the movable typeset.
Yeah. Still, woodblock printing is dope as hell.
Oh yeah.
Yes, it is.
So in the fall of 1727, Benjamin Franklin and a group of friends founded the Junto Club, also known as the Leather Apron Club. Originally, the 12 members were tradesmen and artisans who met Friday evenings to discuss issues of morals, politics, natural philosophy, and the club lasted for 38 years. Franklin,
This is
Wow.
basically just a gentleman's club, so to speak.
pretty much,
But actual gentlemanry.
right?
Right. I want to join.
Franklin proposed that a group be formed of ingenious men, a physician, a mathematician, a geographer, a natural philosopher, a botanist, a chemist, and a this is going to be a hard one for me. Mechanician, which is another word for engineer.
I was gonna say, and a nuclear engineer. Yeah.
It grew over time as they found more and more interested members, and it ended up as a diverse group that included printers, surveyors, cabinet makers, a clerk, and a bartender.
Hell yeah.
Nice.
A branch of the Junto Club called the American Philosophical Society was created in 1743 and still exists. Its members...
That is so cool.
Yeah, it is members only, and you have to be elected into it. I looked into it. God damn it.
How do you join? I want.
Right.
You literally get told, hey, you're going to be a part of this club now.
Can I
Yeah, well-
flash my PhD and get it?
No.
So I'm guessing the way you get into this club is for them to think, this guy's interesting, we want to talk with him.
Yep, pretty much.
However, I would like to point out, nullo discrimine translates as basically we don't discriminate.
Right?
Seems they're discriminating
Exactly.
by not letting you join.
That's what I'm saying. So the members of the
maybe,
Junto.
yeah.
No, go
sorry,
ahead.
I was gonna say maybe the nulo discriminate is like in the modern sense of discrimination of like they try to be strictly meritocratic.
Well, so the actual translation from Latin is making no distinction.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, they definitely made distinctions. Yeah.
Yeah.
Members of the Junto Club were avid readers and intellectuals involved in their individual improvement and of that of society. The Junto was launching pads for many public projects. Out of the meeting came proposals for the creation of the first lending library, the Union Fire Company, the University of Pennsylvania, the Volunteer Militia, Pennsylvania Hospital, and other public projects. We'll get to a lot of those things eventually. But for
They
now...
were basically a think tank.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But for now, you should all know that this club wasn't just a stuffy nerd fest. Most nights were spent...
Yes, was involved. There was women.
Most of these nights were spent liberally lubricated with booze.
Well, yeah, that's what the bartender's for.
And most people don't know this fact, but Ben Franklin loved singing and even wrote 8 songs. Not all of them were good, but some of them were.
That's fucking cool.
And if you walked past where the Junto Club was meeting, you could often find the voices of several of the town's most prestigious members belting out songs written by Benjamin Franklin.
Drunkenly just yelling.
Exactly.
Singing is just musical yelling.
Right?
I like to eat the bread.
Right. Now, many
I'm not
people...
supposed to have 3 pennies worth of bread.
Now, many people know Ben Franklin as an inventor, and as we've established, he's already, invented something. But one of the most important innovations to come out of the Junto Club was the creation of the first public lending library in the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge.
Right. In the group's discussions, they often needed to look up a fact in a book or draw upon a book for the topic of their conversation. Books, however, were prohibitively expensive and difficult to acquire in Pennsylvania in those days. So they agreed to pool all of their books together. And they kept them in a room in which they regularly met so they could readily access them during their meetings. This book collection had the added advantage that they could borrow each other's books and take them home to read. The sharing of books was the root of the idea to form the public subscription library. So in 1731, the library company was founded by the Junto Club members.
Awesome.
Yep.
That is so neat.
I love anything that involves the dissemination of knowledge.
Right?
Agreed.
But yeah.
Anytime I ever hear anybody talk shit about libraries, I get mad.
Like this is tantamount to the invention of the internet.
Yeah,
it is.
I legitimately agree.
Yep.
It was a huge step forward in public education and access to information resources.
Right. So in 1730, or 1731, nobody's exactly sure, Franklin was initiated into the local Masonic Lodge. He became a Grand Master within 3 years.
Wow.
Indicating his rapid rise to prominence in Pennsylvania. The same year, he edited and published the first Masonic book in the Americas, a reprint of James Anderson's Constitution of the Freemasons. He was the secretary of St. John's Lodge in Philadelphia from 1735 to 1738, and Franklin remained a Freemason for the rest of his life.
Not bad for somebody who was indentured till he was 21.
Right?
Yeah.
Now he's the Grand Master of the Freemasons.
Right?
Also, I'd like to point out, the individual in this picture, that's a meat eater.
For sure. For sure. You don't get that way all vegetarian like.
Yeah. You don't get that way off peanuts.
Right?
Oh, what happened to him being a hunk? Oh, Ben, come on.
Exactly. Fun fact.
A lot of drinking, sitting around talking.
Right.
It's fair.
The Library Company of Philadelphia still exists today, and its collection has grown to about 500,000 books, including 2,000 items that once belonged to Franklin himself. So
Damn.
you can go to the first public library in America.
No.
Put that on our list of places we're going to be going.
Right?
All right, so here's a quote for you
Yeah.
guys. Keep your eyes wide open before marriage and half shut afterwards. Benjamin Franklin. For those of you who are going to stay with us for
Spoken
everything
like
on
a
this,
true bachelor.
right? Keep this in mind. Ben Franklin's marriage is very interesting. While Ben was in London, Deborah Reed had moved on. Reed was persuaded by her mother to marry John Rogers, a British man who had been identified as a carpenter or a potter or something. Not much information's about him, but the marriage quickly fell apart as the sweet-talking Rogers could not keep a job and had incurred a large amount of debt before their marriage. 4 months after they were married, Deborah left Rogers after a friend of Rogers visiting from England told her that Rogers had a wife in England. Reed refused to live or recognize Rogers as her husband. While the couple were separated, Rogers spent Reed's dowry, incurred even more debt, and used his marriage to further his own schemes.
He was definitely
Good on
a
you,
potter.
Rogers.
Carpenters are too cool.
In December of 1727, 1 month after Franklin had returned to Philly, Rogers stole a slave and disappeared. Soon after, unconfirmed reports...
What is he gonna do with the slave while he's on the run?
Don't know. I mean, maybe food?
Sir!
Sorry, I go to cannibalism way too easy. So.
No, you do. You fucking cannibal.
Soon after, unconfirmed reports circulated that Rogers had made his way to the British West Indies, where he was killed in a fight. And in his autobiography, Franklin also claimed that Rogers died in the British West Indies. And to this day, John Rogers' true fate has never been proven. This all worked out pretty well-ish for Franklin, though. As
Right.
now, he could move back in on Deborah.
Yep.
He and Reed eventually resumed their relationship and decided to marry again. While Reed considered her marriage to her first husband to be over, she could not legally remarry. At that
Because
time...
she never legally divorced.
Right. At that time, the province of Pennsylvania law would not grant divorce on the grounds of desertion. She could either claim, or she also couldn't claim to be a widow, as there was no proof that Rogers was dead. You sound a little bit taken back. Oh, always play.
Oh, that's just a really dumb law. If your husband just fucking disappears
Right.
indefinitely, it's just like, well, you're stuck in limbo. That's a giant pile of horseshit.
Right. If Rogers were to return after Reed had legally married Franklin, she would then be faced with the charge of bigamy, which at the time carried a penalty of 39 lashings on the bare back and life imprisonment with hard labor.
What the?
Yeah.
Okay, I
They
was
didn't
like,
fuck around back then.
39 lashings. Okay, that sucks. But like, think about it. Like, so you love somebody. All right, fuck. Like, worth it. If I had to get whipped across the back 39 times to be married to my wife, like, okay, yeah, I'll take that.
Right.
It sucks. I'll take it.
Well,
But then life in prison. What the fuck?
Right.
Remember, the area, especially around Philadelphia, there's the common misconception that people came and settled America to get away from religious persecution, and that's the exact opposite. They came to religiously persecute.
Yep.
So your laws for the colony are written by really, really, really religious people.
Right. Well, these people still believed that at this point, lightning was a punishment from God, and Ben Franklin didn't come to save them yet. So we'll learn about that soon. So Franklin so she would face the charge of bigamy. So to avoid any legal issues, Reed and Franklin decided upon having a common law marriage. Deborah was willing to overlook his promiscuous past and take care of young William, and Ben was willing to overlook that whole married woman thing.
You're gonna take care of my kid, allowing me to go discover, electricity? Sweet.
Right.
Also, you said promiscuous past, and I'm just like, promiscuous past, present, and future, you mean, right?
Achichichai. We'll find that out soon. So, Franklin briefly returned to work for Samuel Keimer, who was the guy who he worked for the first time that he got back from, or when the first time he went to Philly, right? Who was in a great deal of debt. Keimer was given a project that involved printing money in New Jersey. It involved skills in cutting and types that only Franklin could supply, as no one else had those skills. The copper press plate was the first one ever used in the country. For 3 months, while at this job, Franklin met friends in positions of power, such as Judge Allen, Samuel Bustill, the Secretary of the Province, Isaac Pearson, Joseph Cooper, members of the Assembly, and Isaac D. Cow, the Surveyor General. These people would all eventually help shape the events of his life and contribute to his wealth.
Welcome to politics.
Right? In 1728, when Franklin was 22 years old, he entered a partnership with Hugh Meredith, a co-worker at Keimer's printing shop. With a loan from Meredith's father, who had high regard for Franklin, they were able to rent a house and import printing equipment from England. He finally got it done.
You gonna be okay?
You gonna be okay, Tom?
One of our audience members who has my Discord
Oh, excellent.
has DM'd me some very inappropriate things that I'm dying at.
Excellent. So, his printing skills were set against the loan, and the profit would be shared equally. Their first customer was a farmer referred to by a friend. Franklin was an industrious, disciplined, and hardworking man. When required, he stayed late nights while his partner Meredith had taken to drinking. And a key factor here, Ben made sure everyone knew that he stayed late.
Right?
Meredith's father had paid only half of what they owed for the equipment, and the creditors were beginning to demand payment. Two friends offered to help out, but only if he was willing to let Meredith go. Fortunately, Meredith realized that he was better off returning to doing what he really liked doing, which was farming.
Drinking and wenching? Ow.
I mean...
Which was what? I didn't hear you.
Farming.
Ah.
Right. So, Franklin bought his share of the business and became the sole owner. In 1729, Franklin then purchased the Pennsylvania Gazette from his former employer, Samuel Keimer, who was greatly indebted, as we discussed earlier. He improved its appearance with better typefaces, articles, and news, and the number of subscriptions grew exponentially.
Yeah, get some.
The Pennsylvania Gazette was published twice a week and contained news and reports on public events. And what made this paper different from other publications and essays and letters what made this paper different from others was the publications and essays and letters from the readers, much of which was written by Franklin himself under pseudonyms.
Dear Benji, I need advice.
Right, exactly.
So, my sister used to do an advice column in our local newspaper when she was younger.
Cool.
And that was constant. Nobody would write in, even though a lot of people read it. So she would have to write in under a pseudonym and ask a question that she wanted to answer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I could see that.
Rupture and
like,
Jay
even if
Bass,
somebody's
welcome to the stream.
Nice. I was gonna say, even if somebody's not having like a particular problem, like, or hasn't asked about a particular problem, it'd be kind of interesting. It's interesting to see people in like weird but not particularly uncommon situations and good advice for how to get it out of a bind.
Right.
Right.
So he had to resist making the Gazette partisan, and through his rough efforts, the paper managed to remain independent as long as he printed it.
Nice.
Now, we're going to move on to my favorite story of Ben Franklin. Franklin's greatest success as a businessman came from his almanac, Poor Richard. At that time, one of the books that received the most printings, and as is today, was the Bible. Ben wanted to write something to compete with the Bible. So he thought, people buy one Bible, right? And they have it for as long as the book lasts. What he needed was something that people would buy every year. And for those of you who live in today's world where almanacs are basically outdated tech, it contained the calendar, weather with comparisons to last year, and predictions for this year, sayings, poems, demographics, aphorisms, and proverbs. Things about industry and frugality. It was like the internet in a book.
Right.
Franklin considered it a vehicle of instruction for the common people who could not afford books. And
I was gonna say, Oh, I'm just old enough to really remember life pre-internet, and stuff like that was like atlases before Google Maps, and other consultant books, like just general knowledge consulting books. My parents have a set of encyclopedias that were absolutely invaluable when I was a kid because Wikipedia didn't exist yet.
Right. I'm BK, Rupture 0522, J Bats, Tom Marie. Welcome to the show. If you guys would like, pull up a chair, listen a little bit. We're going to be talking about history. So, in 1732, Franklin published his first almanac under the name of Richard Saunders, and it continued like that for the next 25 years. The almanac was a bestseller in the American colonies, printing up to 10,000 copies a year, and its success brought wealth to Benjamin Franklin, the printer. And because it wasn't published under his name, he could make commentaries about things that an upstanding Philadelphia businessman could not. But when Ben was getting ready to publish the almanac, he had one obstacle. There was already an almanac on the market. And this one had a magic. As it was published by Titan Leeds, an astrologer and frenemy of Ben Franklin. Now, Franklin was no fan of astrology. Shout out to my mans down with star magic, right? The first edition of Poor Richard's Almanac established an ongoing prank on Leeds. Under his pseudonym, Franklin predicted Leeds' death and encouraged readers to stick around to see if his prognostication was right.
That's so rude.
Right?
Yeah, this dude's gonna fucking die, yeah.
The feud that followed sold a lot of pamphlets, ultimately benefiting both publishers.
I feel like that's like modern wrestling, like having a good feud. It's yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Everybody
We'll
loves
enjoy
a
a
good
good
rivalry.
drama.
Right. Only
Yeah.
one side was happy about it, though.
Right.
The prediction was intended as a joke. Nevertheless, Leeds took offense at it and chastised Saunders, not, Franklin's pseudonym.
Uh-huh.
Hydra says that's the first thing that made you think something Ben Franklin did was rude, right?
Right? Has nothing to do with the mercenary women.
Right.
I think mercenary women is quite a polite term.
He he was chastised for it in Leeds' almanac. Franklin responded by returning the death of Leeds into a running joke. When the date and time of the prediction arrived, and Leeds did not die, Franklin declared that Leeds had died.
Well,
I kind of hope that, like, when Leeds did eventually die, Franklin was actually really chill about it.
Right?
I would like to imagine.
But that someone had usurped his name and was now using it to falsely publish this almanac. In the following years, Franklin continued to insist that Leeds was dead. In 1738, Leeds actually died.
Oh no.
and nobody noticed because he had already been dead.
This prompted Franklin to congratulate the men who usurped Leeds' name for finally deciding to end their pretense.
Oh my god, what a dick!
I'm going to read these articles from the almanac to you guys. But before we go into that, I'm going to let you guys know that Ben Franklin is my spirit animal.
Right?
Oh no.
Courteous reader, I might in this place attempt to gain thy favor by declaring that I write my almanacs with none other view than in the public good. But in this I should be sincere. Men are nowadays too wise to be deceived by pretenses, how specious soever. The plain truth of the matter is, I am excessively poor, and my wife, good woman, is, I tell her, excessively proud. She cannot bear, she says, to sit spinning in her shift of tow, while I do nothing but gaze at the stars, and has threatened more than once to burn all my books and rattling traps, as she calls my instruments, if I do not use it to make some profitable use of them for the good of the family. My printer has offered me some considerable share of the profits, and I have thus begun to comply with my dame's desire. Indeed, this motive would have had force enough to have made me publish an almanac many years since, had it not been overpowered by my regard for my good friend and fellow student, Mr. Titan Leeds, whose interest I was extremely unwilling to hurt. But this obstacle, I am far from speaking it with pleasure, is soon to be removed, since an inexorable death, who was never known to respect merit, has already prepared the mortal dart. The fatal sister has already extended her destroying shears, and that ingenious man is soon to be taken from us. He dies, by my calculation, made at his request, on October 17th, 1733, at 3:29 p.m., at the very instant of the conjunction of Sun and Mercury. By his own calculation, he will survive to the 26th of the same month. This small difference between us we have disputed whenever we have met these 9 years past. But at length he is inclinable to agree with my judgment. Which of us is most exact, a little time will now determine. I have therefore these provinces may not longer expect to see any of his performances after this year. I think myself free to take up the task and request a share of the public encouragement, which I am more apt to hope by this account, that the buyer of my almanac may consider himself not only purchasing a useful utensil, but performing an act of charity to the poor. Friend and servant, R. Sanders.
Oh my God.
That is the note from his first almanac declaring Leeds is going to die. Titans.
Nope,
go ahead.
Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was one thing responding to chat. This is not Mountain Dew. That is the wrong color. Thank you, chat. This is whiskey.
Yeah,
Food coloring goes a long way, bro.
exactly.
Rude.
All right, so Titan Leeds responded in his American Almanac in 1734 to Poor Richard's prediction of his demise. Kind reader, perhaps it may be expected that I should say something concerning the almanac printed for the year 1733. Said to be writ by Poor Richard or Richard Saunders, who want for of other matters was pleased to tell his readers that he had calculated my nativity, and from thence predicts my death to be the 17th of October 1733 at 22 minutes past 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and that these provinces may not expect to see any more of Titan Leeds' performances, and this precise predictor who predicts to a minute proposed to succeed me in writing of almanacs, but notwithstanding his false prediction, I have by the mercy of God lived to write a diary for the year 1734 and publish the folly of ignorance to his presumptuous author. Nay, he adds another gross falsehood to his said almanac. These that I may by my own calculation, I shall survive until the 26th of said month, October, which is untrue to the former, for I do not pretend that knowledge, although he has usurped the knowledge of the Almighty herein and manifested himself a fool and a liar, and by the mercy of God, I have lived to survive this conceited scribbler's day and minute, whereupon he has predicted my death. And I have supplied with my country with almanacs for 7 years, by past no general satisfaction, so perhaps I shall live to write when his performances are dead. Thus, much your annual friend, Titan Leeds. October 18th, 1773, 3 hours and 33 minutes p.m. I
have a request for the stream.
Okay.
Can we add a giant fucking nerd to the list of voices people can buy for a slut? And in 1733.
So, I do have to preface this with I may be biased based on the way you read that. But just
maybe
from the words, it was very much sounded to me as I'm not dead.
Yes. Agreed.
Right? Oh. Looks like all those guys who wandered in left. Well, unfortunately, I mean, sometimes you just don't want to learn. Happens.
Yeah, sometimes you just can't handle highbrow.
I have my own personal heckler here.
Right?
I just love the fact that I just said highbrow streams as this image.
Right? In the next year, the Almanac printed an obituary for the still living Leeds that reported the man claiming to be him was an identity thief.
Oh my God!
Courteous reader, you okay?
Yes! I definitely, coughed up whiskey when you said that.
Mountain Dew!
Fuck you!
Courteous readers, your kind and charitable assistance last year in purchasing so large an impression of my almanacs has made my circumstances much more easy in the world, and requires my grateful acknowledgement. My wife has been enabled to get a pot of her own, and is no longer obliged to borrow one from our neighbor. Nor have we ever... Right, this guy's... He's got so much fucking money at this time, you have no idea.
My wife doesn't have to borrow a chamber pot anymore.
Right? Nor have we ever since been without something of our own to put in it. She has also got a pair of shoes and new shifts and a new warm petticoat, and for my part, I have bought a second-hand coat, so good that I am now not ashamed to go to town or be seen there. These things have rendered her temper so much more pacific than it used to be.
Oh my
wife
God.
doesn't beat me anymore.
Right?
Thanks for reading my shit.
That I may have slept more and more quietly in the last year than in the 3 foregoing years put together. Accept my hearty thanks, therefore, and my sincere wishes for your health and prosperity. In the preface of my old almanac, I foretold the death of my dear friend and fellow student, and I learned an ingenious Mr. Titan Leeds, which was to be on the 17th of October, 1733, at 3 hours and 29 minutes p.m., at the very instant of the conjunction of the Sun and Mercury. By his own calculation, he was to survive until the 26th of the same month and expire in the time of the eclipse, near 11 o'clock a.m., at which of these times he died, or whether he really dead yet, I cannot at this present writing positively assure my readers, for as much as disorder in my own family demanded my presence, and I would not permit me to that I couldn't intend be with him in his last moments, to receive his last embrace, to close his eyes, and to do the duty of a friend in performing the last offices to the departed. Therefore, it is with that I cannot positively affirm.
My God, what an asshole!
Ryan, thank you very much for that follow. Welcome to the Illuminati, most agitated crew on Twitch. I said agitated, but that was because like I had spit coming out of my mouth. Like after you
Good
talk
job.
for like an hour and a half straight, you start to like get problems.
The mouth problems.
Right, exactly. So,
Well, only if you've only received 2 years of education.
right. I cannot positively affirm whether he had been dead or not, for the stars only know that to the skillful. And what will happen when the natural and universal chain of causes and effects, but 'tis well known that the events which would otherwise certainly happen at certain times over the course of nature, they are sometimes set aside or postponed for wise and good reasons, by the immediate particular disposition of province, which particular dispositions of the stars can by no means discover or foreshow. So anyway, he says that, you know, he couldn't exactly say whether or not the guy was dead, right? Mr.
He
Leeds,
is-
right? Go ahead.
He is so your spirit animal.
Right.
Like, you are the reincarnation of Ben Franklin at this point.
Just like being a cheeky fuckhead.
Right.
Just
I mean,
being a little shit.
yeah, exactly.
Like, not even really being an asshole.
No,
not-
just a little shit.
just being a little.
One more time, he wrote about him. Courteous reader, this is the 3rd time of my appearing in print. Hitherto very much my own satisfaction, and I have reason to hope that the satisfaction of the public also, for the public is generous, and I have been very charitable and good to me. I should be ungrateful then, if I did not take the opportunity to express my gratitude for the ingratum this is gonna be hard. Ingratum si dixeris. Omnia dixeris. I
What?
therefore return the public my most humble and hearty thanks. After this, he goes on to talk about, and I'm just looking at time. I would be reading this for the next like 15 minutes. The very long articles that he wrote here, but he said that he received a letter from the dead Mr. Leeds
Oh my
from
God.
beyond the grave that said that the other guys are imposters.
What an asshole!
And you gotta remember, this is in a time when people straight believed that shit.
Yeah, totally.
You wrote that in an almanac. It gets printed. That happened.
Yeah, that's fact.
That is like abuse of public confidence so
Right.
bad.
You're not
It's
wrong.
Like defacing Wikipedia, except people believe it.
Uh-huh.
When Leeds actually died in 1738, Benjamin Franklin publicly commended the imposters for ending their charade.
Oh my god. Come on! The dude is dead! Jesus!
Yeah, he's dead. Who's gonna care?
Right? Here comes the very next, like, how is this connected? Oh my god, what was going on with Ben Franklin? He was literally a needle of the thread of fate. As this actions that he took here had a bit of an unexpected consequence. As revolutionary fervor grew in the mid-18th century and Americans looked for targets to exercise their anti-British feelings, the Leeds family became easy marks. They had sided with the Empire and hated Lord Cornbury and had been charged with somehow being involved with the occult, likely due to the fact that Mr. Leeds was an astrologer.
They're loyalists and witches!
Right. And they lost the troll war. Like, just straight up, right?
Yeah.
By the time the Revolutionary War was at the doorstep, the Leeds Devil was a symbol of political ridicule and scorn. Post-revolution, the legend of the Leeds Devil drifted into obscurity until the early 20th century, when a Philadelphia public relations man revived it to promote a dime museum. Now, when I say Leeds Devil, Philadelphia, were you guys thinking about the Jersey Devil at all?
I was
No.
not.
I was thinking about Gritty.
The Leeds Devil became the Jersey Devil, and the fictitious monstrosity that was birthed of bumps and in the pine forest late at night eclipsed reality. A complex political animal had then been transformed into a cartoonish, pedestrian, childlike monster that never really existed. So, his aunt started the Salem witch trial, and he bullied a man into becoming the Jersey Devil.
Only slightly less well known is this: never go against Ben Franklin when reputation is on the line.
For real. Oh my god.
Right?
That man will slander you into the grave and beyond.
So, here's another quote for you guys. When it comes up here. These are actually a long series of quotes. These are quotes that came from the almanac. Some of them you will recognize for sure. 3 may keep a secret if 2 of them are dead.
Yep.
The way to see by faith is to shut the eye of reason. A friend in need is a friend indeed. These are origin quotes.
Right.
Fish and visitors stink in 3 days.
Lol. I haven't heard that one, but it's great.
Early to bed, early to rise, makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise.
Wrong!
Right?
And bread.
Hunger is the best pickle.
I don't get it.
In the British slang, pickle is another word for condiment.
Ah.
Yeah, makes a lot more sense, but taken out of target, it's so just fucking funny sounding.
Because I've heard hunger is the best sauce.
Right.
Hundreds, thousands of times.
I never have, actually.
Well, maybe you should be more educated.
Lol.
Sir! Go to hell! I spent enough goddamn time in school.
Well done is better than well said.
Yeah.
Dost thou love life? Then do not squander time, for that is the stuff life is made of. And glass, china, and reputation are easily cracked and never well mended.
Just look at Thomas Leeds.
Right?
Oof.
Ooh. All right. So now, the successful printer, publisher, Freemason, member of other secret societies, was well along the way of infiltrating the upper echelons of the colonial elites. Ben enacted today what would definitely be considered a plan of action that was rife with conflict of interest. Ben campaigned and was appointed the Postmaster of Philadelphia. He then used his position to increase the circulation of his newspaper, the Pennsylvania Gazette, by forcing writers to carry it to subscribers.
Oh my god.
You're gonna deliver their mail anyways. Just take this to him too.
Yep.
Oh my god.
Although Franklin didn't although Franklin didn't invent it himself, he redesigned an odometer and attached it to the front wheel of letter carriages. And then the odometer would then be used to measure the number of revolutions of the wheel. Each revolution was then counted by dials, and the end of the trip, the mailman would then know the distance by multiplying the number of revolutions by the circumference of the wheel. That way, Ben Franklin was able to determine which routes were the quickest. He determined postal rates based on the distance and weight, and were standardized for all colonies. He also mandated the delivery of the newspaper for a small fee. His improvements turned the post offices profitable for the first time. In 1753, with the death of Elliot Benger, the Postmaster General, Franklin was appointed the Postmaster General of America, a post that he shared with William Hunter. During his appointment, he toured all of the northern colonies to survey post roads and to post offices and establishing more efficient routes. He traveled for more than 1,600 miles in order to improve the delivery time that his riders had to carry and forced the mail carriers to work during the night and the day. But
efficiency's a bitch.
Right? More on this topic later,
Dick.
as we still have much more to cover about young Franklin.
Damn unions.
Union was not a word yet.
Oh, I know they didn't exist yet. Yeah, sadly.
So Franklin.
I mean,
go ahead.
Of course, unions don't exist yet. He was indentured.
Mm-hmm.
That's your union.
That's true.
That's very true. So Franklin clearly enjoyed using pseudonyms, but one of his more progressive pranks was done completely anonymously. In 1747, he published The Speech of Miss Molly Baker in the General Advertiser. In it, a woman goes on trial for having an illegitimate child, a crime she's committed 4 other times, and wonders why the men involved were never punished. Franklin perfectly balanced humor, sex, and sympathy to both entertain readers and to challenge the double standard. While many people believed Miss Baker's was a true story, it was only in fact partially inspired by true events. As we know, Franklin himself had a son out of wedlock. Allegedly, the founding father didn't come clean until the story's author, until 1777, during the time that he was an ambassador in France. Working with our man JPJ.
Lol.
Right?
True.
In 1748, apparently my image went away here. I don't know what happened. Anyway, in 1748, Franklin, then 42 years old, had expanded his printing business throughout the colonies to become successful enough to stop working. Retirement allowed him to concentrate on public service and also to pursue his longtime interest in science. In the 1740s, he began to conduct experiments.
And dare I say it, he changed the world.
Yes.
And thus he began science.
In 1742, he invented the Franklin stove, which is also known as the Pennsylvania fireplace.
Mm-hmm.
Fireplaces were the main source of heat in the 18th century, but they were inefficient and dangerous and consumed a lot of wood. They also produced a lot of smoke and sparks that could cause fires. Franklin was curious as to where the air that went up the chimney came from. He created an open stove made of cast iron, and then he sought a method to make it more efficient by recirculating the hot air within the house through an inverted siphon and providing the fireplace with direct access to outside air. In addition to creating a stove that needed less amounts of wood, he created a safer stove that prevented fires.
Wait, so was it because the outside inlet meant that the updraft would pull less hot air from the fire, so you'd get more heat in the house?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I asked because I actually want to build a Franklin stove for Afterworlds.
Oh, nice.
Also, I'm pretty sure that because he's pulling air directly from outside, I think, and this is speculation, but I think the outside air would have been more oxygenated, therefore making your fire burn hotter, giving off more heat, therefore requiring less wood.
Also, potentially the cooler, more oxygenated air coming in would both cool embers and also burn them more, both being cooler and more oxygenated. Neat. Yeah, I actually really want to build a nice metal wood furnace for the Afterworlds site for Middletown. For anybody who doesn't know, because I know we have some people who don't, Afterworlds is a LARP we all play out on a tree farm that Udo's family owns. And I would like to have a nice fireplace, because it gets fucking cold and wet out there.
Right. So he wrote a pamphlet explaining the functions of the stove, titled An Account of the New Invented Pennsylvania Fireplace. He was offered by the government a patent for the right to sell the designs for an entire year, but he declined that on principle.
Good for him.
I will say I'm definitely reading that to look up his notes for how to build one.
Right.
Because my access to technology is roughly 18th century in level as far as metal fabrication.
So Franklin then speculated about the usefulness of lightning rods for several years. Since Philadelphia was a flat geography, he was waiting for the church to be built so that he could complete his experiment. One day, it occurred to him that he could conduct the experiment by flying a kite. It was Boston, Massachusetts in 1746 that Franklin first stumbled across other scientists' electrical experiments. He quickly turned his home into a laboratory, using machines made out of what he had found around the house. During one experiment, Ben accidentally shocked himself. And in one of his letters, he described the shock as a universal blow throughout my whole body from head to foot, which seemed within as well as without. After which, the first thing I took notice of was a violent, quick shaking of my body. He also said that he had a feeling of numbness in his arms and the back of his neck that eventually and gradually wore off.
Well, and keep in mind, this probably terrified him, as this was basically the first time somebody had been shocked.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, electricity was used for a long, long time. They found the Baghdad batteries, for instance.
Yeah.
But this is the first time of a lot of electric current.
Right.
Yeah. And having in various physics circuit labs taken varying amounts of electrical shock through my hands. Yeah, your whole body just kind of goes and nothing really works right for like 10 or 15 seconds. It's actually really interesting.
So Ben wrote down all of his results and ideas for future experiments in letters to Peter Collinson, a fellow scientist and friend in London who was interested in publishing his work. By July, Ben used the terms positive and negative, plus and not minus, to describe electricity, instead of the previously words vitreous and resinous. Franklin described the concept of an electrical battery in a letter to Collinson in the spring of 1749, but he wasn't sure how it could be useful. Later in the same year, he explained that what he believed were similarities between electricity and lightning, such as the color of the light, its crooked direction, crackling noise, and other things. There were other scientists who believed that lightning was electricity, but Franklin was determined to find a method to prove it. By 1750, in addition to wanting to prove that lightning was electricity, he began to think about protecting people, buildings, and other structures from lightning. This grew into his idea for the lightning rod. Franklin described an iron rod about 8 or 10 feet long that was sharpened to a point at the end, and he wrote, "Electrical fire would, I think, be drawn out of the clouds silently before it could come near enough to strike." 2 years later, Franklin decided to try his own lightning experiment. Surprisingly, he never wrote about this legendary kite experiment. The only reason we know about it is that someone else wrote an account 15 years after it took place. In his Poor Richard's Almanac in 1753, he described how to secure houses from lightning. This is another quote from his almanac, but this, not Franklin saying that he how to do it. This is his pseudonym saying how to do it.
Right.
It pleases
Mr.
God.
Definitely not Ben Franklin.
Right, exactly. It pleased God and his goodness to mankind at length to discover them the means of securing their habitations and other buildings from mischief, from thunder and lightning. The method is this: provide a small iron rod, but of such a length that one end being 3 or 4 feet deep into the moist ground, and the other may be 6 or 8 feet above the highest part of the building. To the upper end of the rod, fasten about a foot of brass wire, the size of a common knitting needle, sharpened to a fine point. The rod may be secured to the house by a few small staples. If the house or barn is lit, there may be a rod at the point at each end. The middling wire along the range of one from one to the other. A house is thus furnished will not be damaged by lightning. It will be attracted to the points and passed through the metal into the ground without hurting anything. He never patented the lightning rod. Again, out of principle.
Dissemination of knowledge.
Right?
Yeah.
Street
Science
lamps.
for the sake of science.
Do you guys know that he invented modern street lamps?
I did not know that.
Street lamps were supplied by London were round globe-shaped lamps, where the air could not circulate, letting the smoke accumulate and eventually obstructing the light. Cleaning provided too much time consumption, and they were too fragile that even accidental strokes would demolish them. Franklin proposed in 1757 an idea that he saw at a neighbor's house, Mr. John Clifton. He suggested making street lamps out of 4 flat panes, with a long funnel above to draw up the smoke out through crevices and allow bellows of air. This way, they were able to keep the glass clean, and the city would be very well illuminated. He also discovered that 2 wick tubes burning side by side at a certain distance gave more light than 2 separate burners. He never patented this design. Again, out of principle.
Did he ever patent anything?
No.
Awesome.
That's pretty cool.
Oh, fucking hell yeah! I
Yep.
love these.
When in London, Franklin saw for the first time the musical glasses by which which glasses were arranged on a table, rubbed around the rims with wet fingers to produce musical notes. You guys have seen, people play glasses before, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
I've seen people play these before.
right. To tune glasses like that, you would pour water over them to obtain the right notes.
Mhm.
Franklin thought he could improve that experience with playing the glasses. So in 1761, he arranged glasses according to size and fixed them on a spindle. The spindle was then set in a case and turned by a wheel. They called it the harmonica, and it became very popular in its day. Mozart and Beethoven composed for the harmonica.
Cool.
This is one of the
Also known as the glass harp.
Right. It is one of the
Ah.
primary instruments in the classic recordings of Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies.
It's a very bewitching sound.
Right?
Yeah. Well, like normally there's so many. I feel like resonating glass is a very pure isn't quite the right word, but a very pure sound where you're hearing almost just that frequency.
It's
All
where
you're
most-
hearing
yeah.
is the harmonic.
It's
Yeah,
os-
where most
it's
yeah.
often described as the voice of angels.
most instruments when you play a note also include a variety of other harmonic frequencies that just resonate along the same
Right.
essentially physical length as that note.
Right. So we'll start with Dr. Tom. Dr. Tom, can you take a guess at what this is?
What in the hell? So I see a handle that looks like it's for spinning essentially, and a screw,
Okay.
some kind of screw mechanism to adjust a length of something or other.
I promise you it's worse than anything you think.
Is it a sex toy?
Almost.
Okay,
This is
I
a
was gonna
sex
go.
punishment,
Almost.
so to speak.
Almost.
I mean, not a sex punishment, but this is a restraint of some kind.
Okay,
Okay.
I was gonna go with musical instrument, hoping that the handle that screws is for adjusting the tension in something.
Right. In Ben Franklin's day, catheters
Oh!
were rigid and quite painful. Franklin devised a new catheter that had a slightly flexible tube. John, Ben's older brother, suffered from kidney stones, so Ben found a way to ease the discomfort of his brother.
Kinda.
Kinda.
Oh my god! Oh my god.
I mean, maybe in the long term.
Right?
Oh my god, my scrotum has retreated entirely into my pelvis.
It's got nothing to do with the scrotum, bro.
I don't care. It's all the same dingleberry package.
So, you guys have seen all of these inventions. You guys have seen, him doing stuff. This is about the age of, he's at about 40, right? And that was all before he even became close to being what is considered one of America's founding fathers.
Right. This is all just preamble.
But that,
Well, all of his time with those mercenary women, he sure was a founding father.
right?
Hey, he only founded one.
Uh-huh.
Unfortunately, we're all going to have to wait until next time.
No.
Because we're out of time today.
No. I'm having too much fun.
Right? So, next Thursday, we will continue with Ben Franklin, Part 2.
Hopefully with less catheter torture instrument.
We haven't even gotten into, the things that he does with politics. Goodness
Right.
gravy. At this point, he is still firmly a British citizen.
And
Ah.
he is still and will always remain a little shit.
Oh, man.
I'm gonna start calling you Udo Franklin.
Excellent. I mean, it's not an insult.
I know.
So how close do you guys think he's getting to being cooler than JPJ, in your opinion?
They're cool in really different ways.
Right.
Like, JPJ is really cool in an action hero way, and Ben Franklin is really cool in a, like, just being super smart and witty and just fucking, like, cool kind of way.
Excellent.
For me, with JPJ, it came down to basically hey, we're with the British. Oh, we are? I'm on it.
Right.
Where he's just don't get in this guy's way.
Yeah.
Whereas Franklin he's gonna fuck with you.
Yep. Oh my god.
JPJ wouldn't fuck with you. He'd just make you get yellow fever.
Yeah.
Ben Franklin would cut off your head and shit in the hole.
Oh my god. I was gonna say Franklin is cool in like a Ferris Bueller kind of way.
Right. Franklin.
Where he's just cool and chill and witty.
Yeah.
And just...
Phantom Hydra brings it up very close. Badass versus smartass conundrum.
Yeah!
Right.
They're both asses.
All right. So we're going to wrap it up. Everybody stick around for the post show. Tom, Tim, thank you guys very much for being with us. It's been,
As always,
we're going to learn so much more next week.